Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a dork living in Portland, Oregon, who spent too many years listening to podcasts and not doing anything creative. This is my attempt to rectify that, to create and contribute something where I talk to people about their cultural obsessions and try to give some recommendations of my own. Welcome to Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person. Hi, everybody. You are listening to Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person. I am your host, Jeremy. On a rainy Saturday afternoon in late January, I invited two friends here to help me. Not really help me, more like we are making and we are putting on our what our normal off mic conversations do, and just recording it for funsies, or hopefully we can get something compelling out of it. With me today is, you wanna go?
My name is Natasha. I am just a girl living in the world that loves genre culture or genre fiction, I should say, and particularly likes writing about it from a critical standpoint.
I'm Garrett Burt, on-air personality. I don't know what to say about myself.
Repeat guest.
Returning
guest. Yeah.
Country music singer Garrett Burt, and also committed leftist. Those things don't always come together.
No, they don't.
Mm-mm.
Maybe that makes me interesting. I don't know.
I think that's interesting.
Thanks, buddy.
And I think what as a slightly different, call it a slightly different aim from the usual podcast episode, which of course has been so tightly formatted and right on point in all the dozen or so things I've released so far. Instead of talking about a particular cultural obsession, this is more of call it more of an idea was certainly kicking around in my head, and I think everybody else's too, of problems with modern geek culture, nerd shit as it were, because after the problems that happened after it became dominant, almost 10 years ago now.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not really a niche, geek culture anymore. I feel like that's gone entirely mainstream. You know what I mean? Game of Thrones was when I first noticed it, because it was my mom watches Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's that was very much something just nerds consumed.
Yeah, I had a coworker
15 years
say
ago.
that she watched it and say that she was glad that things aren't as bad as they used to be. Women just had it really hard back in those historic times when there were dragons, and yeah.
From the long view,
yeah.
Sure, in terms of being just legally chattel property.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess he is really steeped in history, right?
Yeah.
What's his face?
The War of the Roses is
George R. R. Martin.
George Railroad Martin.
War of the Roses and the was it Albigensian? I think that's how you call it. But yeah, that kind of late medieval, pre-Renaissance, the kind of if you to bring in a video game aspect, if you play Crusader Kings 2, it's the kind of era that game covers of mid-late medieval period through to the Renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
And
serfdom.
I think where the dominant form is feudalism. In fact, I think very popular mods to that game is when people started incorporating Game of Thrones stuff into the game of here you start out as this little duchy controlling one aspect of land, and then through intermarriage and whatever you build your empire.
That sounds
Good
nice.
times.
Yeah,
Indeed.
I like it.
All of my video game knowledge is died after the PlayStation 2. I don't know anything about video games after that.
Oh, funny you mentioned that. There's your copy of Silent Hill 2. I need to get back to you.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Well, I think you can just keep that. The odds of me ever playing it are,
It's
unless it's worth money, which I'm sure it's not.
Yeah. I have a token of Final Fantasy 7. All
I think I have
CDs.
Final Fantasy 7.
That's one you gotta hold on to.
But I think I bought it at a GameStop with the hope of playing it one day.
Yep.
And it's just still sitting there.
I had it because my roommate Candace, who before she left for Michigan.
I know Candace.
Yeah, she had in fact, she was the one who I think I bought her PS2 and a bunch of games off of, and eventually just gave back. I think I gave her back her copy of Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, I think this is maybe in like 5 years ago or so. She's like, here, you have this back. You're playing like a lot of these games again. Enjoy it. We could sell this for make I don't know, beard money off it, but here I think you'll fancy it much more.
Candace, by the way, boy, has she really blossomed in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
She was someone we knew a long time ago that struggled with some stuff in her life, and she's like doing so great. Like she's one of those people on Facebook that I was never like really tight friends with, but I was like, now all her like she's so. I don't know. She's just living a great life now, and it's just so it's so it makes me really happy.
Reassuring.
But anyway,
joined a Grand Rapids roller derby league.
Nice.
Sasquatch. That's her.
That's her name.
Yeah,
that's great.
Pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
pretty good.
I always wanted a roller derby name. I wanted
to just make one up.
Yeah.
Helen in a Handbasket, Faye Smelter was mine.
Helen in a Handbasket's pretty good.
I think a lot of people use that, though.
Oh.
So I went for Faye Smelter.
Faye Smelter is that's good.
Thank you.
Faye Smelter, yeah.
It's my derby name if I ever had one, or my chick punk rock name.
Sure. The Smelters, and you're Faye Smelter.
Yeah, I'm Faye, and these are the Smelters.
I love it. Okay, that's a show.
There we go. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Yep.
Stay tuned for another couple of weeks when we scored out another episode. I think one of the Natasha, one of the things that you'd mentioned talking about your the recent Sherlock finale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a really interesting clusterfuck to watch happen on Tumblr. It's because I feel like we have a lot of questions around the lack of space between creators and their fans nowadays, especially with Twitter, and people, harassing and trolling on Twitter is pretty normal. But for
social media is for.
Yep.
So
it's for being an asshole.
Can I just jump in for 2 ticks? Just because I've heard something happened, I don't know what happened.
I'll explain it.
Yeah. Okay.
Mine stuff too. The last episode of Sherlock that I saw was, I think, God, after the first episode of the second season.
Yeah.
Since then, I haven't seen an episode.
Right. I think I'm nearly the same place you are.
I'm not really dedicated to that. I try to stay out of fandom and in general in terms of the major interactions, because you do end up with a lot of this like echo chamber of awful. But what happened was that there was, especially on Tumblr, which is definitely a place where representation is pushed as being important to pop culture and media, which I completely get behind, but sometimes they go a little too far with it. And in this case, what had happened is people had come up with something called the Johnlock conspiracy. And what it was is that they believed that John and Sherlock would end up together by the end of the show. And so everything...
Wait. I'm confused already.
John...
slash... so John slash Lock?
Yeah. It's Johnlock. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was called the Johnlock conspiracy. And what they would do is they would... back when Sherlock first came out, when this show's been going on for 7 years, people have a lot of time to cook, especially since like a year between seasons, or 2 years between seasons. So yeah, they were creating all of this writing and all of these analytical videos about the future of the series. And when they got to what is appropriately the finale, and it didn't happen, people have lost their shit, lost their shit.
Oh, weird.
Which is really, and what's worse is that they started harassing the people on Twitter. And this is Mark Gaddis, who is in the show, is gay, would have, obviously tried to do appropriate relationship within the show if that was what they were aiming for. Mm-hmm. But he is now being hounded on Twitter by people that are just loud and obnoxious. So, but it happens every time there's something that, where fandom wants something, but they don't get it. Nowadays, it's a lot easier to see that, and also to kind of be completely, dumbfounded by the levels of stupidity people will go through in approaching that. So
that's an interesting take of, or I should say, an interesting evolution of because the internet and social media does do a lot for, I don't know what, just jacking up fan entitlement,
right?
Especially because any group of people with a shared belief much more easy. Instead of like kind of like keeping themselves in check, you'll just kind of you will ping pong back and forth and just and positive feedback bounce up.
Yep.
Well, to me, the whole thing that's so interesting about what you just said is that you have now a fan base of people that they're out there speculating about what's going to happen, and it's obviously some sort of wish fulfillment aspect to it, and when they don't get it, they get angry. That's so interesting, because it would when we were youngins, that would never be a thing. It's like there were people who created I mean there'd be places to vent, but they'd be these funky magazines that
like they'd create zines,
or Usenet,
right,
and that's one of the most beautiful parts of fandom, is that you create based on what you see, and you it's transformative work typically, right?
DIY.
So I'm not represented there. I mean, it used to be like, and for women, I think that that's the majority within that group, right? It's mostly white women and heterosexual women too, or but you also have your representation outside of that too. But you do have like a huge community of people coming together to create things and to kind of bounce ideas off of, and but that definitely, that feedback loop has no exit, right? Like, so if you don't have somebody tempering disbeliefs, which is what they've had to do now, like this is the way that most companies operate. I mean, little tiny rumors get out about certain fandom franchise media, and it propagates through this social media network where, think about the controversy around the Captain America comics earlier this year where Cap was Hydra. Well, guess what? It was, he was being mind controlled by Red Skull. It was a time travel thing, whatever, but people got so upset about it because
That's how they resolved that?
It was horrible writing. It was awful. Anyway, it was awful to begin with, to make Cap Hydra, but at the same token, people that don't actually like interact with it or actually like care about it got involved, and you kind of have this whole idea, like people like there's a whole culture of outrage going on right now in fandom, right? Like people like to be upset more than they like to be pleased by things, I think.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Which is I think the side effect being is like the standard blog post or article post at this point. Yeah, there's not much of a difference between a blog post and an article post, but it's kind of now, as someone I can't remember who pointed out, but it's kind of changed where the primary desire was to provoke rather to inform.
Okay.
And they were, the writing style changed and the headlining changed.
Yeah, totally clickbait, and always, I mean, take, for example, the Mary Sue used to be one of my favorite media things online, right?
What is that?
It's a mostly female-centered view on pop culture and media. And they did attack some of the important stuff that came out earlier. But nowadays, when you go to their articles, they are literally all just clickbait, right? They're just
like, what's like, even you can even make up a funny example. But
oh
like,
God, I wish it's just that they'll go, okay, well, this show is great, but how many white people have, are all over, like,
oh yeah,
or like, for my example, it's Star Wars. Rey is an independent, strong woman, and she doesn't need to have a relationship with anybody because she's a Jedi. And like, it's like, there's this subtle, like what we were saying earlier about, tribalism and the ideas that everybody thinks the same. But when you read something like that and you actually dissect it from a critical view, there's nothing to it. It's air. It's not actually providing a critical analysis of the text within the context of its creation, or even caring about what it's saying. Especially for feminist issues, it's been really difficult to find actual good commentary online about it.
Right, because there is, of course, there's strong feminist critiques to make of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But I think I'm not sure if I understand what you're talking about, but because this is all very foreign to me, but
yeah,
it's just this: can we get upset about it?
Yeah.
Can we find a way to get upset about it? And if so, that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
We're not gonna. I don't know. I feel like I'm talking like
you hit the nail on the head.
Which connects into many other things. One of them, it's kind of is God, I think it's Adam Curtis and a bunch of other people talked about kind of one of the drawbacks to how culture changed is that in the 70s it's kind of you have with the foregrounding of kind of like emphasis on the individual, like kind of the primary motivating factor for working on this, for organizing or for being an act or being an activist or something, or even just not even like in a political arena, but so much emphasis was placed on the importance and the primacy of the personal emotional catharsis or emotional experience. What all became the most important aspect was like no matter what it was that you yourself had had like this evocative or evocative epiphany of this experience, and so it became it degenerated, and so it just became like it degenerated into like the separate or just detached. And so it all just became about that that dopamine rush that that hits where you'll grab whatever critical tool or not that may or may not be applicable to the situation, and just kind of throw that out there, and you'll get the I think I best described it as sharp tools employed by dull minds.
Right, and it can get a lot of attention. Like I read, this isn't about pop culture, but I read a thing in Salon.com a while ago, and Salon.com has become a sort of
shell.
It's devolved.
Yeah, it's not very good. But it was this gal talking about being Indian in America and like saying like, well, white people are co-opting yoga and stuff like that, and it's like, I think there's a substantial criticism to be made there, but she was not making it. And but people but it gets attention.
Yeah,
I don't
it does. People like, so if especially around.
I sound like a bigot right now?
No.
I'm really afraid of that.
It's difficult because it's a loaded topic from the get-go,
right?
Yeah. So in terms of a lot of what we see nowadays is that people are being told that they don't have a right to speak about stuff because they are within a certain mindset or a certain place, and that that's the kind of reactionary shit that got us Trump elected. I mean, because
So if you don't mind me,
go ahead.
Like, I feel like you see a lot of people being criticized for who they are rather than what they're saying. I don't know if that's what you mean, but that's something that really bothers me, because it's like I can say something stupid right now, and I want people to go like, that was stupid and this is the reason why. You know what I mean? I don't want someone to go like, we don't have to listen to you because you're a white cisgendered hetero male. You know what I mean? Like it's like that. That really bugs me. Well,
being told that you're excluded from a conversation just based on who you are,
right,
versus what you think is just at the heart of it is what's wrong.
Yeah, because I'm wrong about shit all the time.
And to not
I'm probably wrong right now with whatever I'm saying.
Yeah, and we should be corrected, right? Like when we make mistakes, we should be corrected. How are you going to learn until you actually make the mistake and get the opportunity to apologize for it instead of being cut out from the get-go, right?
Right, and it's almost a thing of, it's kind of is eventually, with the criticisms that have arisen in the last few years of just like talking about like call out culture, I think in many people like Freddie DeBoer and a bunch of other folks have talked about how part of the realization that hasn't really just twigged to enough people is that your the correctness or the righteous correctness of your moral stance doesn't mean shit for how effective or practical or how well you can communicate that. It's kind of a thing where there are ways to kind of like help people grow and help people kind of like slowly. It's kind of a thing where it's like we have a problem with how do you deal with people who ain't as woke as you?
Yeah.
Where. And I stole that from somebody because all communication and all culture is copying. The other thing was like about the going back to the Sherlock thing. I always thought that one of the criticisms was just was it just like just kind of like blah or bad plotting, and like, was it like on top of between just kind of like a kind of a blah outcome, but you also had like the fan response on top of that, or
it's just it's the nature of television nowadays that they try to be more and more sensational, right? Like, and Sherlock kind of did that, which ended up.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
What happened? Like, are we going to be a no spoilers thing here?
Oh no, let's spoil the shit out of this stuff.
Let's spoil stuff.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened.
To put it into context, okay, so that was the bigger problem, right? Was the fact that John and Sherlock didn't end up together. But interspersed with that was the fact that this season was the season where they killed off John Watson's wife, Mary, who they just had a baby with, and who was, I mean, I'm going to just say this, she was seen as a impedance to that relationship coming through. And then on top of that, the last episode, you have a very touching scene between him and this character named Molly, who's
between
awesome.
Who and Molly?
Sherlock.
Molly. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Where he's forced to say "I love you" to her. He's like one of those gun to the head situations, and it's all his lost sister. So it's like explaining it goes down a rabbit hole you probably don't want to hear about. But just watch it. It's not that bad. It's not great. It's not good, but it is what it is. I liked it.
So what? But what was the uproar about?
The uproar was that so this is the best part. They leaked the episode in Turkey and Russia before the premiere,
the broadcast.
Yep. And so what happened is people were
Russian hacks again.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Well, no, they actually thought it was a fake episode. They thought it was a fake episode, and that they had cut out the part with the kiss between John and Sherlock because that Russia and Turkey aren't so great about
gayness.
Yeah.
Okay.
They really don't show it on television, I guess. I don't know.
Well, Russia's certainly not.
Yeah.
I bet Turkey certainly not as well.
So everybody started, the rumor mill started grinding, and people started believing this was true. And I swear to God, and I'm not even in the fandom, I just saw it happen. And it was just
That's a proper
hilarious.
That's a proper conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it was great. It was a conspiracy theory that they believed so much that they thought that the creators had punked them and released an episode in Russia and Turkey, so that they would be everybody else would be surprised when they watched the show, like they
when
were
they watched the real one where they fall in love.
The rumored
together
fourth
or whatever.
episode never came.
That's amazing.
Wow, that's
like,
different.
I want to do the Simpsons joke where I say, "We're through the looking glass here, people."
Yeah.
Down.
Thank you, Millhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm astounded.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
But that's the tip of the iceberg?
Yeah. The tip of the iceberg, because it's a level of crazy, but the level of crazy that goes so deep that hundreds of people, I mean, I don't have that many people I follow on Tumblr, but that it saturated that element too, was just like, okay, well, this is how fandom is now. We're going to have really strong reactions to stuff based on what we wanted to see come of it.
So this is a light version of that, but this is the first time I kind of noticed this sort of weird, how weird fandom has gotten. Is do you remember this thing that went on I don't know 5, 6, 7 years ago, where someone put forth this theory when the Lord of the Rings films, we're getting a sizzle again, but someone put this
Cat, what are you doing?
Someone put this theory forward when the Lord of the Rings series were out, or they'd been out maybe for a little while. I don't fucking know. But do you remember this thing where they were talking about how there was this sort of hidden Easter egg where when Gandalf says, "Fly, you fools," what he actually meant was get on the eagles and go to go to Mordor and it's to me that's how video game culture has infected regular traditional culture, where it's well, there's some cheat code you can use in movies, and it's I feel like stuff like that pops up on whatever all the time, where it's a fan theory about this, that, or the other thing.
I follow a lot of fan theories. I'm on A Song of Ice and Fire. I was on Westworld when it was coming out. That was interesting because that was a real fly by night kind of, everybody's theorizing and creating theories.
Well, and that show confuses people, right? Because I've never seen it. So.
And much like almost like Lost, or at least what I remember about Lost, kind of it was constructed for that. There was there almost built into because since it was serially released as opposed to just being dumped on there. Yeah, it was just kind of this, and it becomes yet again where almost like the traditional TV model where you always have, if you have an ongoing arc, a mysterious arc, flashback to Twin Peaks. Rest in peace, Michael Ferrer.
I know.
Miguel Ferrer. That's because it's everything which was recreated later on with
well, the X-Files was one of the major ones for that.
X-Files, and also remember just the how big True Detective was.
Yeah.
Right.
Where it just kind of like it allowed people, and like I said, at some point it becomes fun.
Yeah.
And because it's like it allows people just to engage, because people are always going to engage, the modern form of water cooler conversations, and it allows people to engage with it and it becomes a shared, much like sports, a shared cultural thing that's not politics, that you can talk about. You can do you can do almost like a targeted small talk with a topic because it's popular enough.
Right. Yeah. That's what I've noticed about it as well. Is like there's this. Well, if we're not going to talk about sports, and we've gotten past the weather, we're going to talk about whatever TV shows we're watching.
Right.
Yeah.
And
this gives up enough grist for the conversational mill.
Right, exactly. And it I for one, I'm sick of it. I'm not watching TV shows anymore, not because I think there's anything wrong with it, but just because it's like I want to take in something else, because I feel like we're kind of entertaining ourselves to death. Like we're not engaging in our society way that is needful, and we're just watching TV.
Yeah, we're definitely a generation of escapists, I feel like. I feel like for us especially, like, I mean, watching shows weekly, just having the Netflix model now where you can watch all seasons of a show, and it's great, but the engagement is kind of gone, right? Like, we don't the past media stuff is just floating out there in the ether, and there's some value there, but everybody's kind of in the minute, right? Like, this is how.
Oh, sorry, someone demands attention.
I love her so much.
Yeah,
there's a strange cat.
We're being joined by new addition to Apartment Studios, Callie Cat, who I'll probably attach a photo of at some point. But I think it's not so much just I think it's just not a necessarily reduction of engagement. I think it's just a different form.
Yeah.
And I think that there are similar with like the amusing ourselves to death, which I probably should finish reading that book. It's not, I think that's been that has been, since mass media has been a thing. I think, but the kicker is that in times past, it has not. We've had enough other aspects to compensate, so it wasn't just the mass media consumption. You had much more like people had more political activity in their lives,
and I think that's what I'm talking about. Is like, now if you just express a political opinion at all,
right,
people get uncomfortable because I think, one, they haven't ever fucking thought about it,
and
two, it's just impolite to talk about politics, and it's like that's troublesome.
I think it's also too, what kind of politics do you want to talk about, right? Like,
I guess that's a good point, because we were just talking about how there's a lot of actually political talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of like how much of the crew or how much of the cast of this show
it's mostly around identity politics, because we can all agree that representation matters and that people need more pop culture with more people that represent them, right?
Right.
But
wider palette.
Yeah, wider palette. But that becomes the only conversation.
Right. And that's something I want to get to the bottom of. I legitimately do. You know what I mean? But I feel like every time I read about it, I'm like, I'm already lost.
Well, and two, like the 90% of the stuff that's out there is just bullshit. Honestly, like, we all know that. Right?
Well, former Oregonian, Sturgeon's law is always in effect in shit. Always in effect in all areas of everything. So
yeah,
I don't know what Sturgeon's law is.
95% of everything is crap. or 95. What is it? It's something like 95%, 90 to 90. Fuck that up. 90 odd percent of anything is crap.
Yeah.
Right.
From former Eugene resident and classic sci-fi author Ted Sturgeon.
Nice.
Okay.
So I have a bit of a theory on this, and my theory is, especially when you look at a social media with a younger user base like Tumblr, is that they're just figuring the world out, but they're not figuring the world out by the world that is around them, because the world that is around them, objectively sucks, right? So I'm going to take the one thing that matters to me most, which is pop culture or media, and I'm going to turn the lens on that. And then if I don't have anything to complain about in that realm, then I'll start complaining about the fans in my own fandom that aren't doing enough to politicize this content.
Right.
Instead of asking about real politics, which is completely devoid from the conversation.
Because this is so foreign to me. Like I was never all that plugged in. You know what I mean? And I'm still not. Like my web
avoid
activity.
It at all costs.
I don't. No. Well, okay, but my web activity is very probably a little bit more than what my dad does. There's certain blogs that I read. I go on Facebook, of course. I look at Twitter. Mm-hmm. There's a cadre of podcasts I listen to, and then I don't have any connection to it.
Yeah.
And then there's these young people, 10 years or more younger than me, and their whole lives have been, in the mix, and they have this whole, I think they have this whole consciousness that I don't have. And I'm not saying that in a positive or negative way. It's just the way that they experience the world is very different than the way I do. And so it leads to things like, I'm watching this thing and now I'm criticizing.
Mm-hmm. Or just not criticizing it in the correct way, right?
Right. I don't even know.
It becomes a lot of times, a lot of the performative, superficial hang-ups happen to there.
But I am really concerned about this idea that people seem to largely be influenced by how they're being entertained, and they cast their understanding of reality within that context of their entertainment. It's almost the reverse of what it used to be. You went and experienced reality and it was scary or it wasn't, or whatever it was, and then you went into entertainment to have a respite or whatever.
Escapism, but
it's a release, right, from the rigors and pressures of reality.
Right. It's the sort of the low grade drug of nowadays. Is just we need to just be perpetually amused by something.
Yeah.
And
a louder opiate of the masses.
Yeah, exactly. And we need, and we need to sort of we're at a time where we need to be more conscious. We can actually create a world that's more just and all that stuff. And we're not doing it because we're just so, in a sense, it's self-involvement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because whatever you like in entertainment is kind of something that's reflected back upon you that makes you feel, whatever. You're part of the show, so to speak.
There's so much of it too. You can find whatever niche you want in it, and I think mostly it's just about the idea of this kind of slacktivism, right? What stupid buzzword from a couple of years ago, but kind of prescient in the sense that we don't have people going outside of those spheres and saying, this is the world as it is, and how can I actually change it?
Right.
I don't think people even, I don't think they even know how.
And it kind of gets to, I think, the original, almost getting near the original idea that I had kicking around in my standard unformed way in my head of it goes back to not just the inaccurate kind of the bad attempts at critiquing something, but also the again back to the idea of just mindless consumption of the unawareness that the unawareness that this is something that needs to be done. Once in a while, you'll hear a video game podcast where they actually will bring up they'll talk about monetization in a way that doesn't just mean the extra little in-app purchases that you can do on on a phone game that they need they'll use just to suck an extra 99 cents out of you. It is a sense it's because it goes back to because geek and nerd are very, 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 very new identities, and as the I can't remember the author, but the piece one of the pieces in Jacobin wrote about like 4 years ago is how it's an identity. It's a modern identity where you are identifying not through national origin, through class, or through ethnicity, or job, or religion. It is your identity is through the genre entertainment, the pop culture you buy.
Yep.
Right.
And it becomes a thing, and I think part of it is it becomes an even bigger aspect where, because genre entertainment has been a thing for I guess for if not quite forever. I mean, novels have been around majorly since the early 19th century, or thereabout. Just to give it a fit, and then you had. And then eventually you had the I don't know enough. I don't know enough literary history to know when genres as like specific things,
like sci-fi,
like
fantasy. You'd probably be looking at the early 20th century for that, right?
Right,
and probably late 1800s, because when you think about when like Conan Doyle was writing and that sort of stuff like that, you had genre fiction there. But like, so let's say like,
but was it considered genre fiction? Like this isn't just kind of a book. This is a book of this type.
This is a mystery.
I think that. Yeah, that was the proto. Okay. The proto. I would guess.
Sort of like the Penny Dreadful kind of.
I would say in the 20s. Yeah. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like the 10s, 20s era would be when you start to get this kind of,
solidification. Yep. Right. I think so, because that's when Lovecraft was writing.
Yeah. That's definitely when the pulps.
Dashiell Hammett was probably writing in the 20s.
Western pulp culture.
Yeah.
Right, and then Louis L'Amour. I don't know when he wrote, but.
I don't know where he wrote. He wrote forever, but I don't know when he started.
Yeah. Right, so that's what I mean. So, but I mean, I think the Western was probably already solidified by then, but I don't really know. But anyway, teens, early 1900s.
Yeah, the long ago, the before time, but one of the things that I can remember reading about is that like problems in what always bothered me, being someone born, it's like I turned 40 last year. So like into this stuff for years, and definitely remember, how it was in the 80s, which is like when Patton Oswalt wrote the thing that his kind of like ill or unformed negative response to a lot of the stuff, complaining about this. I think a few years back that got a lot of shit about the. It's like before when it was still when subculture or niche culture before it became culture, before it won. When you had to actively go out and search the stuff as opposed to it just being, dumped on you with a snow shovel, and you had to avoid it. Similar to porn, where at one point it's kind of a thing where forever you had to go out to the woods to find it, and now it's like what was it? I think Chris Rock was making a joke about how now you have to like have like special programs to keep it off, to keep yourself away from, to keep it off of your damn computer.
Yeah.
Like that back in the. But it's like growing up with the stuff, and it's always, I think, eventually, especially in the 90s, as I went through finished high school and headed off to Ann Arbor to go to school, became much more aware of it. Became more and more aware of the uncritical, just endless consumption of it, which Dashiell Hammett talked about and wrote in an essay back in, I think it was either I gotta track down the original year, but it was an essay either in the 20s or the 30s talking about the problems with genre entertainment, and that as he wrote. The mediocre, the average mediocre novel doesn't get published.
Yeah.
The mediocre detective novel does.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can't be a fan of something unless you take everything as it is.
Right. I think that's definitely a part of it. It's not just it's almost like the next step, permutation of it, of not just for one's own self. It's like I so love these genre trappings, and everybody has, mentally beaten because of when I read something set in this fictional worlds, you're in the, whether it has like dragons or vampires or spaceships or zombies or whatnot, so into this world that at some point the desire or the enjoyment of mentally existing in this environment where these genre tropes are overwhelms any sort of, I don't know, what, critical sense?
Yeah,
or
critical capacity.
Critical capacity. It's like, I don't, that was always the, it started where, I think maybe it really did start with the pulps of, hey, of just almost a sense of like creative pornography of just you just satisfy that urge of like I need like horror Lovecrafty shit, and like that's it, that's all I need.
Lowered standards.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the way I feel about like, and I'm not in this world, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of pushback on this, but that's what I feel about like 85% of anime. Like, to me, it's just like people like it and they just consume it.
The whole
like
country likes it, so
well, but I mean, but you know what I mean? Like people that get really into anime, I feel like they just get into it, and I watch it and go, this just seems really silly to me, or really strange, and it could just be my outsider, perspective, but I think that it's just they get to where they like that world so much,
right?
That
or the tropes in the
style,
environment, the style.
Yeah, it's the mindless consumption of content for sure. I mean, and you see that a lot with TV shows where they go on and on and on, and then you end up with these divides about whether or not, is this good? Is this bad? Do I like it? Do I not? And who does everybody like it? If nobody likes it, then we're obviously all in agreement here, right? But it becomes just like, give me whatever is in this franchise and I'll be happy.
Well, like, do you guys remember that movie? It came out 3-4 years ago called Room 237.
Oh yeah.
It was about people's sort of fan theories about The Shining.
Reading way too into it.
It's effectively cutting together, or I should say just compiling 8 YouTube fan theories. In fact, no, it really was.
Oh my
it
God.
was fan theory of the movie. This, you do enough, pot, or I mean, I don't, mushrooms or DMT. I don't know much like that, but certainly, but it's like you get high enough and start talking.
Yeah.
Or maybe if you're of the bent where you don't even need chemical stimulation and just hear all of the
weird fan theories.
Well, so and here's what, like, I saw that movie, I enjoyed it well enough, you know what I mean, like, but what I thought about it was that it's amusing, but it's really not that interesting.
Yeah.
It's amusing to watch for the duration of the film, but it's not. It's
not compelling in and of itself.
It's just there's just the substance really isn't there. Like, for instance, like I was surprised that like Freud was only brought up once, and I'm not saying like Freud needs to be a touchstone for every.
No.
But what I am saying is that it's like they have these pie in the sky theories that really weren't like
substantiated at all.
Well, they didn't have any tie to traditional sort of strands of thought that go through back in history.
They didn't add to the actual message or symbolism of the movie, maybe, or because I see that all the time. I mean, you have the whole idea of like the No Prize, right, from Marvel, like. Where you find something and you explain it, and it doesn't add anything to the story, but it's just...
I mean, I guess the way I saw that movie was I had heard it hyped up a lot, and the way I felt about it was amusing enough, entertaining enough, but at the end of the day, it really didn't have any meat. You know what I mean? There was really nothing to chew on. That was my takeaway from it, was that like it was an interesting sort of look at, and I don't even know if they were really like being critical of, how this fan culture comes up. I really don't know what the point of the movie was, but not that it had to have a point, but
just if you have one hamster wheel and you keep turning and spinning on it, you're gonna find something, but it might not necessarily mean anything to anybody that watches the movie.
I just don't think it's worth taking very seriously, and I guess that's the way. And to me, that movie encapsulates a lot of the way people talk about media nowadays, where it's like all these like theories and and it's like, okay, fine.
Well, 95% of it is bullshit.
But it's not a real interesting critical theory of a piece of culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's I think I think the two things that I have to it is one is it is almost a thing of I think the documentarians were really the point of the movie was much more about wasn't necessarily really about the content of each person's particular each person they talk to their take more of this is of more of the mechanism, more of the phenomenon of that you have this is you have this movie which has become a common thing and was just the film was made in such a way that had plenty of little gaps that people could come to it with their own pre-existing everything and fit their own little bits together to try to string together. And it was about the mechanism or the practice of people fitting together, trying to come up with this overlaying take on it, trying to explain it to themselves.
And that was the actual interesting thing about the movie, right? So it was that you've got this unusual, awesome movie, and this is how people interpret it.
Yeah.
But what I noticed is that when I would talk to people about it, and I didn't talk to a shitload of people about it, but the people I did talk to about it, they actually wanted to talk about the theories themselves.
Yeah.
Does that make...
You're right, yeah.
Does that track?
Yeah.
And to me, the theories are whatever, just throw them away.
It's almost, they're almost arbitrary and kind of whatever... moon landing shit, and here's evidence for it in the film.
And I feel like that's what people want to talk about. And I feel like that in microcosm is kind of what Natasha's been talking about.
My life right now.
Yeah. It's we don't really want to talk about the interesting sociological aspects of this phenomenon.
Yeah.
What we want to talk about is what the people are talking about.
I think, too, there's a lot of projection going on, typically, right? You want to add importance to something that you love, and you want to create meaning for it out of how you personally connect to that media. I am of the idea that is not the correct way to speculate on stuff, but I'm kind of an asshole that way. But in the same token, you get this kind of echo chamber of how people want to see the... I mean, we were talking about this earlier with the Mary Sue concept, right? I, as personally, for me, I got into Star Wars fandom because I felt like it was necessary to fight that kind of generalization of the first female heroine that was a primary character in Star Wars, right?
Are you talking about
Rey? Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So after that movie came out, and it's not a perfect movie, it's not a great movie, but I mean, I'm part of that fandom now because I'm so kind of obsessed with it, and just Star Wars in general right now, was just realizing that this whole portion of the audience didn't know how to handle criticism of that character, much less the movie itself. And when they did criticize the character, it was obvious that they were doing it from the lens of, it's a woman and she doesn't fit the model of Luke that we want her to. Or she's, or she does, and we're just going to project everything that we love about Luke onto her, and she's, our connection to that character. So there's just... what you find a lot with this theorizing, especially in modern media, is that people are just looking for, either they don't know how to speculate, and so they just create crack theories that just they get hundreds of YouTube videos of those just coming out, oh my god, whose father is this character? And this is the clickbaity shit, and it's actually going into our modern media. That's why my friends have been interviewed by The Atlantic and the New York Times, and they're just in theorizing on this stuff, is because that is seeping up not just from this kind of small niche community that loves it, but into the popular media where your parents are clicking on those links and you're,
yeah, and it's kind of you have a cultural inability to think or be so out of practice or never educated to coming up with a take on this stuff.
Yeah.
That even the people, even who were always the traditional gatekeepers, I guess, side effect of the loss of central media authority, who were the gatekeepers, people who are now the gatekeepers have either lost the ability or are under such pressure to make up for what is just the destruction of
news in general.
Of news journalism in the last 20 years. It's kind of they've had to go for this stuff because this is what gets, like I said, if journalism was always about what gets eyeballs, then it's kind of like even more shallower or stripped down or irrelevant than it was even way back when.
Yeah.
One of the I think the other thing about fan theories that I always had a problem with, and like I said, I listen to the Crack podcast a lot when they have like David Wong, aka Jason Pargin, on there. You talked about how because what annoys me is, I say this being a person who has a podcast talking about problems with pop culture, is the almost like pretentious wankery of needing to there's an obsessive need to kind of like fill in all the gaps of whatever, and so you start getting, not only do you get like fan theories, which was before just kind of this fun little thing, but it now has become such an established thing that even that plenty of Cracked or AV Club or even like some of the better pop culture sites are now like routinely hey, this fan theory says X X X X and X, which drives me nuts because it's kind of a thing of it's making a thing out of something you don't really need. You don't need this extra filling thing. It's kind of there almost like there's this the example that Jason Pargin uses was that so many people felt not victimized, but certainly felt taken by Fight Club and Sixth Sense, that all of a sudden there became this defensive need to get out. It's like, it's like almost not wanting to be victimized or being a victim or anything. It's like, I'm going to get out in front of this movie, and it's like you can't enjoy the movie. You have to put yourself against. Yeah. You have to put yourself against the work that, hey, I'm deliberately putting back this. It's using like almost like cynicism, like pointless cynicism, but treating that as if that were considered wisdom.
Yeah.
So are you saying? So, because I'm not familiar with a lot of things you just referred to, but like, are you saying that people try to pick out flaws in things, or vagueness in
they more try to highlight under the
like
terms
when you're
of
talking when you're talking about Fight Club, for example, like what did you mean by that?
Imagine because in 1999 you had two major films. Where the quality of the film, regardless, because of the climatic twists, were effectively the linchpin on which their cultural weight, impact, whatever, revolved around, centered on. The main thing was because of these twists that because of this, it's almost like certain people didn't like the fact that they fell for the twist.
Yeah.
Oh.
And it becomes a thing of them putting themselves against the movie, of like, and in fan theorizing, which was just kind of this cute thing of like, well, almost like how online conspiracy theory hunting has become a thing of, but more so than ever was before, and like completely irregardless of like how many valid conspiracies are actually out there, it becomes a thing of like an obsession born out of defensiveness. Out of an apprehensive trying, like, I'm not going to get taken by this movie. This screenwriter is not going to one up me.
Yeah.
I will, I can't
enjoy the story like that.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to put myself against this thing. And it's like, what this is all really about is because of this, or this fan theory, like what is presented to us is not what's going on. It's really about this, or.
That's so interesting. Cause like I watch a movie like that and that's fun to me to be like, oh, it tricked me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And that's a perspective I guess I just don't appreciate, where it's like you feel dumb, so you feel
no, and I think there's
or
those types,
you can feel dumb.
And then there's me that as I like looking at writing from a meta perspective. I want to know the fundamentals of what is going into it and how the story is being told, right? Especially from like a narrative standpoint. If you look at like
story structure.
Yeah. I want to see the bigger picture. And that's why I do all the theory and speculation stuff. I don't really actively present theories as much as just critique them, because I mean like that. But there's a critical analysis and presentation of a work, and then there is the continued misinterpretation of it that goes around with that, right? Like I feel like I get into it so that I could just say no to misinterpretation, because there's a lot of misinterpretation that goes on to the point where you get these kind of swarms of people that think one way about something and don't realize that there's a completely different perspective on it.
Right. And to me, it seems like that should just be regarded as like, because I don't think there's anything wrong with the constructing theories around stuff. No. I don't think it's a big deal. The problem I have is it should be considered like, I don't know, this might be sort of a salacious characterization, but it should be thought of as largely masturbatory.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Well, like I said, it's not so much. I think and the problem that I have it's not just that people make their own fan theories. It is the fetishization of it. Something about this has now become a valid and big standard things that we need to have. That, but without the ability to figure out, does any of this correspond with reality? Or is there any validity here? Does your argument bear any weight? Or is it just kind of like weird? It's almost.
It seems like it's just unmoored sort of speculation or
right. But it's almost, unmoored speculation, but almost like some of the arguments or some of the theories concocted are almost completely, deliberately targeted and completely against what the actual thing is about.
Yeah,
it's like it's about this, but really, it's what's going on here is this thing that is unsupported and it's complete. It's your take could not be more wrong.
Yeah.
Now, whose take? Are you speaking from the voice of the theorizer, or are you speaking from your own personal
this is my own take,
voice?
my own voice of responding to the article that death to tabula, but the little tabula auto linked, this fan theory about such and such will blow your mind, and like, no, fuck you,
total fuck
stop,
you.
Stop breathing right now.
Yeah.
So what do y'all think? Because I feel like you guys know way more about this than I do. What do y'all think the impetus behind that is? Like,
it's basically, I think it boils down to wanting to see a story that you connect with and you like. I think I brought this up earlier, but I'm using the Star Wars fandom as a generalization. I know a lot of people, especially older gentlemen, did not like The Force Awakens, and I think they liked Rogue One better. Did you?
I haven't seen Rogue One yet.
They're
I'm a bad nerd.
I think that they both films are, it's kind of a thing where they both excel at different things.
Yeah, exactly.
Where and some of the it's almost a thing where if only they could have been, they could have taken the best bits of both and kind of taken and scrapped out some of the bad aspects. You would have the super, the work would have been just kind of like would have stood up with the original trilogy. But.
So are you saying that basically like what a lot of this hinges on is taking something that you like and making it about you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And my whole thing, and I don't know what your opinion on this is, so I'm going to out myself. I don't think Rey is Luke's kid. And that's a huge assumption that almost all of the Star Wars fandom is already.
I don't have an opinion about it.
Yeah.
I don't care if she's Luke's kid.
Yeah. And why this was important to me especially was because I felt like the people that were promoting it were completely ignoring the fact that she was an independent character and that she has her own story to tell. And also, if you were part of the speculation on it and you know the spoilers, there's nothing possible that leads in that direction. But even knowing that, people that knew that would continuously harass and actually ad hominem insult everybody that brought up a theory that was against that.
Right, and I think that's part of the thing is it is not just the take. Yeah. It is I don't know, weaponization of the take.
Yeah.
It is it's part of the problem that I have with more part of the downside of, like, you have a lot of people learning about all this great critical theory, but using like all the worst habits of internet message board culture. It's kind of like, again, sharp ideas. There is critical work that needs to be done with this stuff, but it is carried out in like the dumbest way possible.
Yeah.
That's the way it seems to me.
Yeah.
Maybe this has always been a way, but I just say because I grew up on. I mean, I've had a modem since I was 14.
Yeah.
So I had BBS. I was on BBSs and Usenet from the early 90s onward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that means you filtered through a lot of awful stuff.
Right. And
I'm the same. I feel the same, and it's just never going to go away. It's just a matter of if people believe the status quo is one way. That actually actively discourages people that have alternate viewpoints to promote their own ideas and to challenge these ideas.
Right, and just the existence of someone with the contrary, the resistance, the existence of anybody with the contrary take, or not a contrary, with anything. There we go. Yep. Anything other than perfect agreement is personal attack. Yep. There we go.
Oh yeah, that's it. Right there.
Yeah, so and that's what I'm talking about is this or had talked about earlier, is this tendency to make disagreement about ideas somehow criticisms of either if someone's disagreeing with you, you're interpreting that as some sort of rejection of who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, it's you don't have to be listened to because you're this sort of person.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
And,
and I don't know if that's what you're talking about, Jeremy, but
I think that's part of it. But it's also, again, it's kind of the critique equals criticism, which equals personal criticism, which means personal attack. When you identify with so much with the shit you like, and it's great to like some stuff, but but it becomes a thing where we're running out of time, so I can't get into like the fact that I think plenty of people still operate out of like a 70s or 80 cents of like needing to, we need to support this stuff because otherwise it's going to go away.
Oh, yeah.
Because this 80 cents of scarcity, that if you don't want to go see this genre entertainment or support, we need to watch this shitty superhero show, otherwise it's going to go away. Like, no, shut the fuck. No, this is called, nerd culture is culture.
right.
But it's because people get so into it that any criticism, because I identify with this band so much that anybody who attacks this band for whatever reason is because I tie my identity into it, now attacking me.
Yeah.
And the internet just exacerbates that and exacerbates all the worst aspects.
Well, yeah, that's what because I remember that being young before. I definitely did not have access to the internet, and if I don't know, if someone criticized Black Sabbath or something, I would get really mad about it. But it's it's not worth getting mad about. But I do feel like the internet, really, sort of encourages that. I can make this all about me,
right?
Like I am Black Sabbath or whatever.
Yeah.
Name 3 of their albums, the last song.
Yeah, and if you cannot, and anybody else comes up to it, if you cannot immediately jump to their calling you out on there was like prove your shit. It's like you have to you have to answer me these questions 3. Right. You are therefore you're not a real fan. AKA you are invalid. Your tastes are valid. Your preferences are not valid nor welcome.
Yep, exactly. And not to like bring it back to whatever, but I really feel that as a woman, finally kind of getting into fandom for the first time, it's really, really apparent that people's status quos are in their minds all the time when they're interacting with people, especially younger people, right?
What do you mean? But
yeah, I want an
example, or can you tease that out a little?
Okay. So, for example, if you were to go to one of the, so here's a real example, right? There's a major Star Wars news board, the Jedi Council forums. And when The Force Awakens came out, they had a huge surge of people coming in to enter into that, right? And primarily this audience was female because we really loved the story and we identified with it. But you saw this very critical backlash, and so the thread that's been viewed 6 million times, right, got shut down, and they told us to just leave because they didn't want to hear any more of our speculation and theories because we weren't aligned with the status quo idea of things.
You were all interlopers.
We're all new fans.
Yeah, new fans. You are all interlopers, and thus your take or opinions were invalid and unwanted.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're like Outlanders and Children of the Corn.
Yep.
You should put that.
What? I love that.
Outlander.
It's not a good movie, but
no, I watched it. It's great. It's the perfect cheese. I love it.
It has Linda Hamilton in it. That's the weird.
I
forgot she was in it.
Wait, it's not Courtney B. Vance.
What was the name of the kid? Ezekiel or?
No, that kid's a good actor. Whoever played, I think it's Ezekiel, isn't it?
Which one? The leader kid or the red-haired kid?
The leader kid.
The leader. That's the weird thing. The leader kid went on to play Cousin It, and I think used some of his money to. God, what was it? It was. Lived in New York. Still lives in New York. Played Cousin It. Lives in New York. And I'm probably like confusing that maybe like 2 or 3 different IMDb bios together, but it's something like after 9/11 was using some of it, using his like Cousin It money to for like local charitable educational uses.
Good for him.
That's great.
Whatever. All right. And speaking of Cousin It, does anyone have any recommendations of new stuff they've really been digging?
You know, I thought about this the other day, and I forgot what I wanted to recommend. So if somebody else has a recommendation, I'm sure I'll remember mine.
Well, podcast has been kind of difficult. I've gotten into imaginary worlds, even though they're 20 minutes long, and I need longer podcasts. And obviously, I love Chapo Trap House. And everybody listening, go to Patreon and spend the $5 to get the extra episodes. They are completely worth it.
She's right about that.
And also, music-wise, there's lots of good stuff coming out. Recently, they came out. Have you heard the Portland band On? AAN?
Nah.
No.
I recommend them. They're local. They're wonderful. They came out with an album a couple months ago that I can't stop listening to.
So I will recommend a horror film that I watched with my lady friend of the show, McKendry Thompson. Mm-hmm. It's called Hush. It is on.
Oh yeah, I've heard.
It is on Netflix. It is excellent. I will say this, that we tried to watch it once and I was stoned, and there's a very difficult to watch scene in the first 15 minutes of the movie, and I was like, I cannot do this. But we went back to it, got past that scene, and that movie is excellent. Like, it is an excellent horror film, which is like, it's part of a new sort of change in horror. I mean, all sort of, for lack of a better word, slasher movies are about, a woman being persecuted by some killer, right? This is one of those films, but there's been a turn lately where they're more evenly matched, and that's a sort of theme of the film itself. And the way that this movie deals with that is really interesting and really fun, and it's just great.
Nice.
If you like horror films, you could do a lot worse.
Is it sort of like The Last House on the Left, like revenge fantasy kind of thing, or is it?
No.
Okay.
No. I think that recently a movie that I think typifies the sort of thing I'm talking about really well is a movie called You're Next, and they do it in a really fun way, almost in an action movie sort of way in that movie, but it's gory enough that you could still call it a horror film, and it's it's tense enough that you can still call it a horror film. But this movie, I don't know how to put it. It's like the female character is being pursued in the normal sense, but you get this more of like, oh, these people are to some degree evenly matched.
Nice. I like that.
And the way that she sort of garners the strength to combat this person attacking her is fun and really interesting.
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, I highly recommend it.
Good. My recs are, well, first after he's been popping up a lot more places lately, but finally started watching Adam Curtis's stuff, who is a British
Huge fan.
The vast majority. If you're listening to this, you probably know who Adam Curtis is. I've heard him before. He is a British journalist, essayist, filmmaker, mix of the thing, who puts out a lot of makes these little like kind of documentaries that'll usually run. Like I think when all the episodes are run together because they air them in episodic format on the BBC, they'll be like 4 hours long. He just had
3 to 4 hours.
3 to 4. Yeah, he just had one that came out in like fall winter of last year called Hypernormalization. Quite timely. Yeah. Yeah.
Uncomfortably timely.
Yeah.
When you get to the end of it.
Yeah.
He had an earlier one called The Power of Nightmares, but the one that we've been watching lately is The Century of the Self.
Love it.
Which is one that he came out with in I believe 2002. It starts with I think Sigmund Freud, but more importantly his children taking and his relatives rather taking his work and applying it to social control through governments and through public relations.
He was a man called Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. I just love the way
and that's a very
David Attenborough kind of style.
Right, it's usually scored to slightly discordant English electronic music.
Yeah.
Like post Kid A type music.
It makes you uneasy, but not so uneasy that you want to stop watching.
Yeah, a lot of like discordant electronic tones. Speaking of discordant electronic tones, band-wise, we have, thanks to the Discover Weekly thing, and we'll also find out that they're actually coming to, they have an appearance. Well, very soon after the time we're recording this, but there's a band called Serotones, or the Serotones, which would do just kind of just loudmouth, just great garagey rock and roll. A couple other bands to find out. There's one called Shit Present. And then also Orbs, just ORBS.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
Which is they have a song called off of All right, and where can we find y'all on the internet, or what you're working on that anybody else can check out for the dozens of listeners that we'll get that may or may not hear this?
My mom, my best friend. You can find me on Ashes for Foxes at Tumblr, and I'm also on that Twitter, and I'm around.
I am at Comrade Garrett on Twitter, although I don't post that much. You can find me I'm in two bands. One's called Honky Tonk Union, www.honkytonkunion.com. I'm in another one called the Davenport Brothers. I think we're at reverbnation.com / either Dav Bros or the Dav Bros.
That sounds about right, yeah.
I can't remember which. Bro? I do dab. If you want to give me a text, it's 503-807-2435. That's still nothing's become of this. I've said it 3 times on this show. Maybe one day. And then that's it. That's my internet presence.
All right, and if you want to reach me, you can email the show. We're at givingthemic@gmail.com. We finally have a Facebook page, so please, the standard liking of that's just facebook.com/givingthemic, MIC. Twitter is at givingthemic, and I'm trying to think of anything else.
What's your 4chan handle?
Yeah, Anon.
I don't think I've ever actually had a login there. Let's see,
mine's Pepe666 Pepe. I don't even fucking know. I've never been to 4chan.
You
need
otaku.
Yeah,
you need. You need more. That's kind of. I would say that's almost. That's a bit redundant when you have like furry anime Nazi. That kind of the after a while becomes that's just alt-right. Just kind of.
Used to be on B.
Oh God.
I'm a Pepe White Pride Sailor Moon. I don't fucking know.
The Hollywood Theater put out it did screen the Sailor Moon R, one of the Sailor Moon movies,
because it's awesome. And
is it called R because it's rated R?
If only. No, it's just kind of.
They have a naming convention that's all letters, but they don't make any sense.
Okay, I know nothing about Sailor Moon except that lots of girls I went to high school with had like stickers and shit on there. Yeah, but I don't even know if they really like.
No, I watched all of it. I watched all of it.
Anyway.
Yeah.
By the time anime became a thing in America in the late 90s. Thanks to Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon and then Pokemon's, I was already as an undergrad going to Animania or Animania, however the hell it was, but
Animaniacs.
Yeah.
Animania, which were monthly kind of like monthly screenings, like once I don't know, it was like one Saturday a month. Either in Angel Hall or in the Modern Language Building in Ann Arbor, where they'd have like 6 to 8, no, actually more than that, more like 8 or more hours of stuff.
Wow,
that was everything. And this was back in the mid '90s, where like people were.
That's a lot of anime to consume at once, in my opinion.
You would come. Get it. Yeah, it was too expensive to go buy them at Suncoast Video. The box set of VHS was like $100. You're like, no, I can't do that.
Yeah,
so the person that had it was the one that you wanted to go hang out with.
Or that's when you had like you had VHS tape trees where like people would record this stuff, and then other people, you'd send them away through the internet to people who had fan subtitling gear and knowledge to kind of like put these fan subs together, and then they would screen that. And that's how I saw like Miyazaki films years before it ever showed up on Disney's radar.
And now all Miyazaki films have celebrity voices to them and are released by Disney. So
and
they're great
and playing this weekend at OMSI, I think.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Bam.
All right. I think that's about it. I mean, our music, once again, main theme for find them on SoundCloud is the Mysterious Breakfast Cerealer. That's his name.
That's awesome.
At SoundCloud.
That's the dude who does the
main theme,
chiptune stuff that you do.
Yes,
okay,
that's great.
The opening and exit theme that we are probably talking over. And all right, well, thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. For a handful of those of you listening, again, if you could your standard podcast provider of choice. Do the like and subscribe, and usually if you do actually hit the subscribe on this thing, helps us out a lot because of automated algorithms and ranking things. But I've been Jeremy. I want to thank Natasha and Garrett. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Editing services provided by Entertainment Unlimited. Visit us at euavp.com.